You need to give me back the $50,000. Vivian. Today. The words, cold and dripping with entitlement, shattered the gentle hum of our family's annual Memorial Day barbecue. This was Gavin's latest scheme, an arrogant, greedy gambler who claimed to be the dutiful son, now demanding that I, the quiet sister-in-law, immediately pay a supposed debt. He presented me with official court papers, a civil suit for elder financial exploitation, loudly accusing me of stealing from a sick old man, his father, Walter, whom I had dedicated the last 7 years to caring for. He fully expected me to collapse in panic, beg for mercy, or immediately comply to avoid public scandal. But my hands didn't shake. My expression remained completely unchanged. I just gave him a slow, cold smile. What Gavin didn't know was that I had anticipated his attack on the money, and he had just made a fatal miscalculation by mocking the one piece of useless junk I kept my late mother-in-law Sarah's stained cookbook. The trigger for his downfall was right there in the recipe for her classic apple pie. I am Vivian, 38 years old, a formerly licensed physical therapist who gave up her career to move in and care for my father-in-law, Walter. After his stroke, for 7 years, I have managed his medical needs, his physical therapy, and the chaos that is this family, all while enduring the constant psychological warfare waged by Gavin, my husband's younger brother. Gavin, a failed stockbroker with a crippling gambling addiction, had always viewed me with contempt, calling me the low-earning caretaker. He saw my quiet efficiency as weakness, and my dedication to Walter as a desperate bid for security. The injustice loop, the cookbook's secret financial security. The attack came at the worst possible time in front of 22 family members and neighbors gathered in the backyard. The smell of charcoal and cut grass was instantly replaced by the stench of drama. Gavin stood over me, wearing a cheap suit and a triumphant smirk, thrusting a manila envelope filled with court filings into my hands. This is a civil action. Vivian, he announced, loud enough for the entire backyard to hear. You have been withholding $50,000 from Dad's care fund, and I am formally suing to have it returned. My heart twisted, not from fear, but from the brutal memory of what that money was truly for. I remembered my late mother-in-law, Sarah, on her deathbed 20 years ago, pulling me close and pressing an envelope into my hand. She knew Gavin was a black hole of financial need, and this $50,000 was the last of her emergency savings intended to pay off a devastating debt he owed his father. Walter. Sarah had made me promise, tearfully, that I would keep the evidence of this debt hidden from Gavin so he couldn't destroy Walter too. I had spent 2 decades guarding that money and that secret, silently bearing the burden of a financial sin that wasn't mine. Gavin leaned in close, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper designed for the ears of our closest relatives. You have disgraced this family. Vivian, you think you're so high and mighty, taking care of Dad. But secretly, you've been skimming his savings. He straightened up, addressing the crowd. She's been living here rent-free for 7 years. Did you really think we wouldn't notice you trying to steal our father blind? You low-grade mercenary. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. While I was sacrificing my career and spending my own small savings to honor his dead mother's dying wish, protecting the very $50,000 he was now demanding, he was using his own mother's name to justify his crime. He had mocked Sarah's worn, sauce-stained cookbook just last week, calling it sentimental junk that belongs in a dumpster. He saw only a low-grade caretaker, blinded by his own greed, failing to realize that his mother had seen his betrayal coming 2 decades ago and had been prepared for it. He thought he was suing me for theft, but he was actually suing for the return of his own decades-old shame. No, I will not let you destroy Sarah's legacy or Walter's future with your lies and your greed. You think I'm panicked? But I am simply waiting for you to finish your performance. This is the debt you owe, Gavin, and it's time for you to pay the price. The injustice loop, the public humiliation, sentimental legacy. I placed the legal envelope on the patio table and slowly picked up my purse. I didn't reach for my phone or for a lawyer. Instead, I pulled out a small, plastic-wrapped item from the bottom of my bag, Sarah's antique cookbook. It was thick, with a faded blue cover, stained with years of love and cooking. The memory of the last time I held this book with Sarah flashed in my mind, her weak hand guiding mine to the apple pie recipe, whispering that this book was the only thing Gavin hadn't bothered to steal. I had endured 7 years of insults and financial strain, always keeping this book close. Not for the recipes, but because I knew it held the truth that protected Walter and the memory of his wife. Gavin's face contorted with confusion, then renewed contempt. What is that? Vivian, you're showing us sentimental junk right now. Are you having a nervous breakdown? He laughed, turning to his brother. See, she's losing it. She's trying to distract us with an old cookbook. It's literal trash. He saw trash, but I saw evidence. While he was gloating and publicly dismissing his mother's most cherished possession as junk that belongs in a dumpster, he completely forgot that I, the low-grade mercenary, was the one who was entrusted with her actual financial legacy. His attack on my financial integrity was about to be destroyed by his contempt for his own sentimental legacy. The moment was perfect, the greedy son, standing under the summer sun, publicly mocking the one item that held the undeniable proof of his own fraud. He has confused sentimentality with stupidity for the last time. He wants the $50,000 tracked fine. I will track it right back to his own disgraceful past. I opened the cookbook to the apple pie recipe, which was marked by a handwritten note from Sarah. Tucked inside the page, perfectly preserved, was a single, aged document. I held it up for the stunned crowd to see. It was the original canceled check, dated 1998, for the exact amount of $50,000. Clearly marked in the memo line, repayment of debts, gambling losses. The signature on the back was unmistakably Gavin's unblain. The family gasped in unison. Gavin's triumphant face instantly drained of all color, the self-satisfied smirk replaced by stark, exposed horror. The only person who stole $50,000 from this family, Gavin, was you. 20 years ago, I stated calmly. And your mother, God rest her soul, gave me this check to ensure you couldn't do it again. Your civil suit for theft is based entirely on a lie. Emotional resonance hook. My heart was racing, but my voice remained steady. I had finally kept my promise to Sarah, but the cost of the last 7 years of silence weighed on me. It felt like a lifetime of holding my breath had just been released in one shocking moment. I had endured so much because I believed that peace and dignity could be maintained through quiet sacrifice. But standing there, watching Gavin, the man who called me a low-grade mercenary, crumble, I realized that sometimes the most effective weapon against a narcissist is simply the cold. A hard truth he's too arrogant to ever see. Did you ever have a moment where someone's arrogance gave you the perfect, unexpected weapon to defend yourself? Tell me in the comments below. How did you turn their contempt against them? Gavin's defeat in Part 1. The collapse of his $50,000 lawsuit didn't crush him. It sharpened his malice. The narcissistic rage boiled over because he wasn't just broke, he was publicly humiliated, exposed by the very sentimental junk he had mocked. He couldn't attack my money again. So he targeted the next most important thing, my professional dignity. I knew he would try to destroy my reputation. I had spent 7 years quietly working as Walter's caretaker, and the greatest sacrifice I made was allowing my physical therapy license to lapse when I focused entirely on his care. Gavin was counting on that technicality to ruin me. The injustice loop. The professional strike career divided by dream. The official letter arrived 3 days after the barbecue. It was from the State Licensing Board for Physical Therapy. The subject line, Notice of License Suspension Pending Investigation, hit me like a physical blow. The complaint alleged that I had been practicing unlicensed geriatric physical therapy on Walter for 7 years, and claimed my initial license had expired years ago, putting Walter at risk. The suspension was a threat to my future livelihood. I remembered the sheer joy of my work, the satisfaction of helping people regain their mobility. I had sacrificed my private practice, my steady income, and my professional identity to keep my promise to Sarah and Walter. I had spent endless, Lonely hours reading Walter's charts, studying his condition, and designing therapy routines, all because I genuinely loved helping him. Now, I was being branded an unlicensed criminal, a quack who endangered the man I was sworn to protect. Gavin called, his voice thick with false concern. The perfect embodiment of a cold actor. I was so worried. Vivian, I had to report you for his own safety. He lied. He hasn't made progress in 3 years. You're a low-grade mercenary, not a real professional. You're lucky I didn't call the police. You know unlicensed practice is a felony. Right. I saved Dad from your useless, expired skills. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. While he was celebrating his supposed victory, filing that complaint with the board, and leveraging his knowledge of the law, he overlooked a tiny, technical detail that the dedicated caretaker, had planned years ago. 4 years into Walter's care, I had taken an obscure geriatric ethics refresher course online, not because I needed the license for the money, but because I was obsessively dedicated to ensuring Walter received the absolute best, most current care possible. The certificate from that 3-day course, a document he would have dismissed as just more pointless paperwork, held an obscure state law addendum passing the course, automatically reinstated a lapsed license and recertified the Calais practitioner for 5 more years. My sacrifice of time and dedication to ethics was the very weapon that rendered his attack moot. You see an expired piece of paper. Gavin, I see the technicality that protects my integrity. You tried to destroy my life by weaponizing the law, but you failed to read the fine print of the dedication you mocked. I will not be labeled a criminal for the sake of the man I love. The injustice loop, the hearing and reinstatement dignity, divided by reputation, the board's investigator. A stern woman, named Miss Stammer, Chen, visited our house. I remained calm, my back straight. As I led her past Walter's room, Gavin's attack had forced me to confront the consequences of my choices in front of an official authority. The tension in the air was palpable, threatening to shatter the fragile peace I had built around Walter's care. I remembered the pain of having to tell Walter through his alphabet board why a strange woman was asking questions about my work. His confusion and fear were almost unbearable. I felt the weight of the entire family's scrutiny, who now believed I was a fraud who had taken advantage of their vulnerability. Ms. Chen quoted directly from the anonymous complaint. Words that were clearly Gavin's own vile phrasing. The complainant alleges that Miss Vivian is an unqualified imposter whose care is not only stagnant but potentially detrimental to the patient, using an expired license as a cover for her mercenary residency. The villain thought his complaint fueled by jealousy over my closeness to Walter and the home was a final, crushing blow. While he was likely celebrating his successful smear campaign, I calmly placed a crisp certificate on the table, the geriatric ethics refresher course document. I had paid for that course with my own money and studied for it late at night. Long after my physical work for Walter was done, Ms. Chen reviewed the document, then looked up at me with sudden, professional respect. I hadn't just kept up my license. I had gone above and beyond to ensure I was qualified in his specific care area, an effort he would never have made. You sought to weaponize my dedication against me. Gavin, you sought to prove that my love was nothing more than a disguise for greed. But the depth of my professional commitment is the very thing that proves your complaint is a lie. I will not allow your narcissism to invalidate 7 years of my life. Ms. Chen closed her notebook, the action sharp and final. She looked at me and said, Ms. Vivian, I see no evidence of an expired license. Your credentials are not only current, but your documentation of the patient's care is exemplary, far beyond what we typically see from a family member. She stood up. The complaint has been officially dismissed. She then added, pointedly, filing a malicious false report with this board carries its own set of consequences, and we will be investigating the source of this anonymous complaint. Gavin, who had been secretly listening from the hallway, let out a soft, defeated choke, realizing his attempt to destroy my career had resulted in the confirmation of my professional excellence and had opened an investigation into himself. Emotional resonance hook. That moment, when the investigator validated my 7 years of unseen work and dismissed Gavin's lies, was more satisfying than any paycheck. But validation doesn't heal the wound of being so maliciously targeted. It makes you realize that to a true narcissist, your best effort will always be their worst enemy. The deeper your sacrifice, the harder they will try to crush you. Have you ever been accused of faking your dedication, only to have your meticulousness save you? Share your story in the comments. How did you weaponize your own hidden diligence? The failure of Gavin's professional attack in Part 2 only fueled his desperation and pushed him toward emotional violence. He knew he couldn't beat my logic. So he decided to destroy my will to fight by attacking the most vulnerable person in the house, Walter. His goal was total emotional isolation, forcing Walter to publicly betray me. The injustice loop. The emotional fracture health, divided by trust Gavin. The sadist announced a sudden, mandatory family video call. He placed the laptop in Walter's room, framing the shot to make Walter look frail and isolated. Then, Gavin stood just off camera, his presence an oppressive shadow, using Walter's alphabet board, which I had painstakingly taught Walter to use for communication. Walter slowly spelled out a devastating sentence for the entire family to see: The sight of Walter being forced to lie to use the very tool of his recovery against me was the deepest wound yet. I remembered the sheer effort of teaching Walter to move his hand. The long, painful hours we spent together. The joy when he spelled his first word after the stroke. Walter was my ally, and I was his protector. This confession, broadcast to the family, didn't just label me a thief and an abuser. It shattered the trust and intimacy I had built with him over 7 years. The pain of his betrayal, forced by his own son, was almost paralyzing. Gavin stepped into the frame, his face a mask of faux grief that didn't quite hide the sadistic triumph in his eyes. "See, I knew it," he said, his voice shaking with feigned emotion. Dad finally got the courage to tell the truth about this low-grade mercenary. He looked directly into the camera, aiming his words at my husband. "She's been gaslighting him for years, thinking he couldn't communicate. She tried to make him look senile so she could steal the house. She's the worst kind of predator, a sympathy parasite." Gavin believed he had total control of the narrative, using Walter's physical weakness as the final, absolute proof of my guilt, while he was relishing his victory, forcing Walter to look like a frightened old man finally telling the truth. He failed to notice the colored foam balls on Walter's bedside table. 2 years prior, anticipating Gavin's emotional abuse, I had established a secret, nonverbal threat indicator system with Walter, a safety net that used those 3 colored balls: E.g. yellow for under duresses, red for immediate danger. Gavin saw them as harmless physical therapy tools, never realizing that my high EQ and commitment to Walter's psychological well-being was the active trap that would expose his abuse. "You think you destroyed my reputation, Gavin, but you just committed elder psychological abuse on camera. You used my beloved patient as a pawn, and for that, there will be no forgiveness. You misjudged the true strength of the bond you tried to sever. The injustice loop, the safe word reveal poetic justice." I ended the video call without a word and immediately drove the 10 miles home. I walked into Walter's room, not hysterical or defeated, but with an unnerving, cold calm. Gavin was still there, basking in the silence of his supposed victory, the laptop still open on the dresser. Gavin's presence was a physical violation of the sanctuary I had created for Walter. I remembered the countless nights I had slept on the fold-out cot next to Walter, enduring his thrashing, helping him with his terrifying night terrors, all to ensure he felt safe and dignified. Every moment of that sacrifice made Gavin's triumphant smirk, knowing he had violated Walter's trust, all the more infuriating. "Done packing?" Gavin asked, his voice smooth and contemptuous. "The family knows you're a monster now. Vivian, no one believes a word you say. You're totally isolated." He gestured to the alphabet board. "See? Dad confirmed it. I saved him from the sympathy parasite." Gavin saw a defeated woman and a compliant father. While he stood there, gloating over the confession Walter had been forced to spell out, I walked to the bedside table and pointed to the colored balls. I asked Walter, using the simple, silent signals we had practiced, "Is the confession true? Or were you threatened, Walter?" Using the nonverbal signal we had designed for this very situation, slowly pointed to the yellow foam ball, the need help divided by threatened signal. I then silently prompted him to spell the first letter of the prearranged safe word for Gavin is present. Walter, with shaky but deliberate effort, pointed to the letter L for lying. He used the simple physical therapy tools to communicate the truth of his abuse. "Your sadism just became my evidence. Gavin, you thought you had total isolation, but you forgot that the quietest people often have the most carefully constructed defenses. I will not be silenced. And Walter will not be your victim." I immediately used my phone to take a clear photo of Walter pointing to the yellow ball and the letter L on his board. I then uploaded the photo to the family group chat where the video call had taken place, adding the single, chilling caption, "This is what Dad is really trying to tell you. Stop the video at the 10-minute mark. Watch him flinch." Gavin lunged for my phone, but I was too fast. The public exposure was instantaneous and devastating. He was no longer the concerned son. He was the brutal thug who threatened his sick father. The text messages from his own brother, now seeing the truth, began flooding my phone. The emotional fracture he sought to create was now the final fracture of his own social standing. Emotional resonance hook. The sight of Walter pointing to that yellow ball, knowing he was finally safe to tell his truth, was the most profound moment of my life. But the scars of that forced betrayal remain. To watch someone you love be physically and emotionally coerced, to lie on behalf of their abuser changes you forever. You realize that some battles aren't about money or houses. They are about the dignity of the vulnerable and the absolute cost of silence. Has a vulnerable loved one ever had to use a secret signal to communicate with you? Tell me about the moment you realized their subtle cry for help, and how you answered that call. Gavin's exposure as an emotional abuser in Part 3 resulted in total social ruin. Desperate and financially depleted, he turned to his final target, the house. His scheme was calculated and cruel, designed to permanently remove Walter, drain his estate, and force me out, all under the guise of professional care. The injustice loop. The last asset, financial security divided by legacy. The call came from an unfamiliar number. It was Gavin. Triumphant. "Vivian, your services are no longer required," he announced. "Dad had a severe decline and has been placed in a top-tier, long-term care facility." He proudly confirmed that he had used Walter's power of attorney to sign a contract with a notorious nursing home, complete with a 1-year, non-refundable deposit of $100,000. "You have 24 hours to vacate the house," it declared. "It's time to settle his estate. And the house is mine." The news hit me with crushing finality. Not only was the house the physical manifestation of Sarah's legacy and my 7 years of care, now at risk, but Walter himself was isolated and medically vulnerable. I remembered how Sarah had pleaded with me to keep Walter home, saying, "They put the old ones in those places to forget them." This $100,000 deposit, paid with Walter's few remaining assets, was the final, devastating theft of his dignity. Gavin hadn't just stolen money, he had stolen Walter's last vestiges of freedom and safety. Gavin called back 10 minutes later, savoring the moment. It was necessary. "Vivian, he needed professional care. Not that low-grade physical therapy you gave him. I'm doing this for his own good. This is what a real son does. The house is legally mine now, and that $100,000 is non-refundable. There's nothing you can do. You've lost everything. You, useless parasite. Gavin believed he was brilliant, using legal paperwork and a huge financial deposit as an unassailable trap, while he was celebrating the success of his crisis saboteur move, thinking he had won the house and Walter's remaining estate. He was completely ignorant of the incapacity protocol I had established 2 years ago. I had spent countless hours collaborating with Walter's primary care physician, developing a binding, multi-signature protocol, a detail he had missed in his arrogant haste. The protocol required not only the doctor's sign-off but also the signature of Walter's specialized geriatric social worker before any significant change in residence could occur. The social worker was a detail Gavin, the high-status son, would never have consulted. His $100,000 deposit was secured on a contract that, by law, was fatally flawed because it lacked the second required signature. You confuse a signature with legal authority. Gavin, you confuse a big check with competence. Your arrogance makes you blind to the subtle, crucial checks put in place to protect the vulnerable from people exactly like you. I will not allow your greed to bankrupt the man who sacrificed everything for you. The injustice loop, the voided contract. Poetic justice. I didn't waste a second arguing with Gavin. I immediately called Walter's geriatric social worker, Ms. Linda Hayes, an ally I had cultivated over 3 years by always providing meticulous, honest updates on Walter's condition. Making that call forced me to relive the crushing reality of Walter's condition, the very illness Gavin was exploiting. I remembered the exhaustion of realizing that my own energy and expertise were no match for Gavin's relentless legal and financial schemes. The $100,000 was the last of Walter's savings, and the thought of it being lost due to a predatory, non-refundable contract was devastating. The facility director, speaking to Ms. Grepsgrepet, Hayes on my other line, arrogantly confirmed Gavin's claim. The deposit is $100,000. Non-refundable. The paperwork is signed by the patient's power of attorney. There is no recourse. He has a legally binding contract. Gavin had only focused on securing the primary signature, power of attorney, and the money, arrogantly believing those two elements made the contract ironclad. While the director smugly quoted the contract terms, Ms. Hayes calmly reviewed the incapacity protocol that I had meticulously organized. She confirmed the absence of her signature, citing the specific clause that invalidated the entire agreement due to the omission of the geriatric social worker's mandated assessment. Gavin's complex, high-stakes trap was destroyed by a single missing signature, a detail he was too contemptuous of the social worker class to bother obtaining. You aimed for total destruction, Gavin. Instead, you just purchased your own ruin. That $100,000 was supposed to buy you Walter's silence and my defeat. It just bought you an empty jail cell. Within 2 hours, Ms. Hayes ordered Walter's immediate discharge and alerted the facility's legal team to the violation of the incapacity protocol. The facility, fearing a lawsuit and professional scrutiny, voided the contract. However, citing the financial penalty clause, they legally refused to refund the $100,000 deposit to Gavin, who was deemed the liable party. Walter was returned home, safe, and Gavin was financially annihilated. He had thrown $100,000 into a non-refundable void of his own making. Emotional resonance hook. That moment, when the financial facility called Gavin to confirm they were keeping his $100,000, was pure, cold justice. But the true victory was seeing Walter back in his own bed. Safe. It taught me that money is a weapon. Yes. But true protection lies in quiet preparation and the diligence to protect a loved one with bureaucracy that the greedy never see coming. Have you ever created a small, specific safety net that saved you from a huge financial attack? Share your moment of quiet. Calculated triumph in the comments. Gavin's financial annihilation in Part 4 stripped him of everything but his rage. The $100,000 was gone. Walter was home, and Gavin's reputation was in ruins. This final, explosive stage was not about money. It was about pure spite. his narcissistic rage driving him to a scorched earth attempt to destroy the house and terrorize me before he fled. The injustice loop. The final destruction legacy, divided by safety. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Walter was asleep, and I was reading downstairs. My phone buzzed with an alert from the security system, not a door or window alarm, but a discreet internal signal. Intruder alert, basement boiler room pressure mat activated. Gavin. The destructiveness flaw personified. It had broken in through the old laundry chute access door, avoiding all traditional sensors, aiming for the most critical areas to cause maximum structural damage before dawn. The violation was profound. This wasn't just about theft. It was about the destruction of my sanctuary and Walter's last safe haven. I remembered the sheer effort of cleaning up the kitchen after Sarah died, making the house feel like a home again. I had spent 7 years protecting this house, this quiet legacy, against financial schemers. And now a physical brute was inside, intending to destroy it with his bare hands. The immediate threat to Walter, asleep upstairs and vulnerable, was unbearable. I heard the dull thud of Gavin moving through the sublevel toward the electrical panel. I imagined his triumphant, enraged monologue. I may be broke, Vivian, but I'll take everything from you. I'll make sure this sentimental junk pile is uninhabitable. This is what you get for crossing me. You, low-grade mercenary. He believed he had the element of surprise and at least 15 minutes to cause irreversible damage before the police could respond. Gavin believed he was a master criminal, bypassing the perimeter alarm. He was completely unaware that my physical therapy expertise, my useless skill, had taught me about pressure distribution and wireless sensors. 3 months ago, anticipating his final, desperate move, I had quietly installed 4 wireless, pressure-sensitive alarm mats in the hidden access areas of the basement. He didn't just step on a mat. He stepped into a trap. The despised caretaker, had set. The moment he activated the second mat near the fuse box, he triggered the next phase of the plan, a motion-activated internal siren, preset to a piercing police frequency. You came here for violence, Gavin, and I'm going to ensure you get justice, the poetic kind. You wanted me to panic and run. I will not run. I will simply wait for your arrogance to destroy you one final time. I didn't call the police immediately. I called Walter's neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, an 80-year-old retired Navy SEAL who knew about the security setup. As the piercing, internal siren sounding exactly like a police team was already inside the house blasted through the basement. Gavin panicked, thinking he was surrounded and trapped. He tried to sprint back to the laundry chute. The loud, unexpected noise, combined with his high-stress flight, caused him to lose his footing on the dark, uneven basement stairs. A moment later, the basement was silent, save for a low, guttural moan. Mr. Jenkins arrived 3 minutes later, armed, and found Gavin incapacitated, lying at the bottom of the stairs with a broken leg and a serious head injury. The police arrived, finding the financially ruined Gavin next to the damaged electrical panel. Caught red-handed, he was arrested for felony breaking and entering and vandalism. Walter, safe and sound, was completely undisturbed. Final monologue, the architect's freedom. The divorce was swift and total. My husband filed immediately, horrified by his brother's actions and the public scandal, giving me a clean break. The insurance payout covered the minimal damage Gavin inflicted, and I used the remaining money to establish a secured trust for Walter's long-term care, ensuring he would never be financially vulnerable again. 3 years later, I hosted a quiet dinner party in the renovated house, now truly my home. A monument to Sarah's sentimental legacy. Walter was doing remarkably well, enjoying the sunroom I had designed specifically for his therapy. Gavin, I heard, they was still fighting multiple legal battles, stemming from the elder abuse complaints and the felony break-in. Unable to find work and completely disowned by the family. Now living alone and broken. My friend, Maya, looked around the beautiful, quiet space. Do you ever regret the sacrifice? Vivian, that you lost 7 years of your professional life to fight this monster. I smiled, thinking of the stained, treasured cookbook, now sitting on a pedestal in the kitchen, encased in glass. I didn't lose 7 years. I said, I spent 7 years earning my freedom and sharpening the weapons I needed. I thought I was being a dutiful daughter-in-law, but I was actually becoming an architect of justice. I realized that the quiet, meticulous intelligence I had always used to care for the vulnerable was my greatest strength. I wasn't the low-grade mercenary, the sympathy, parasite, or the low-earning caretaker. I was the architect, the strategist, the loyal ally who refused to be underestimated. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't the loud, public confrontation, but the quiet, dignified silence that follows. It's becoming so utterly secure in the life you built from the ashes of their destruction that the memory of their arrogance simply becomes irrelevant. Did you find your own strength through an act of sacrifice you thought would break you? Let me know in the comments. How did your quiet resolve turn into your greatest victory?